Namo Buddhaya. Namo Buddhaya. Namo So, Dhamma friends, I want to start this evening by answering a few questions from the box. So this question, may we practice walking meditation outside? I'll grant your request. In fact, starting tomorrow is that following that slightly modified schedule, as we mentioned before, and that includes, if the weather is good, to encourage you actually to practice not only walking meditation outside, but even sitting meditation outside. At least try it one time, because doing the meditation outside can have a different effect, because the vibrations outside are different, and there's more natural, pure vibrations outside with the nature and so on, and it can have a certain effect on your mind. But the reason why we didn't do it at the beginning, of course, the weather wasn't so good. It's supposed to improve by tomorrow. But because if your mind is not distracted, if your mind, is distracted and not more focused, it's easily distracted by being outside. So hopefully after 3 days of meditation, you will have had some sufficient, calming and centering, so that when you go outside, the mind will be more centered and peaceful, and won't want to be, gee, look at, and kind of just being able to walk through the forest and hear the sounds and smell the freshness of the forest and hear the crunch of the leaves under the feet, and kind of just be able to, practice awareness without getting caught up in just kind of normal activity. So that's why we wait until a few days after the retreat. But then it's good, because a lot of people find they actually can meditate better outside. But of course, depending on the weather. But that doesn't mean you can still, walk inside. But especially by in the afternoon, you'll be in those extra, in the extra sessions. But the first session at say 9 in the morning, and at 2, continue sitting in here. But in there's an extra hour and a half, or the sessions afterward, during the interview periods and so on, then people could try walking or sitting. Actually, we have a special sitting area down there with a peace pole, and that the people could take their cushions out, or there's some other benches and sitting around. So, yeah, it can be done. But if you're too distracted, then, like with insects especially, because outside you have to be aware that there's going to be insects crawling around, and so you have to have a good concentration to bear them up, and not to get distracted by them. Otherwise, you're just not going to benefit too much. But to be able to feel that beetle crawling over your head and feel all the sensations shooting through the nervous system like fireworks. Or you hear that crunch of the leaves and, what's that? Snake. But it's all good for watching your mind. There's a question about perceptions I briefly mentioned this morning. How can we distinguish right from wrong or neutral perceptions? Well, I'm going to talk more in detail about these perceptions as one of the 5 aggregates that I mentioned last night. Perception is basically the way the mind creates mental pictures out of raw sensory vibrations, such as you hear a sound. In reality, it's just a sound, but the mind comes up with the idea that that's the teacher's voice, or that's the sound of that machine making noise, or that's the sound of the birds. So this mental image that's usually associated with a name or a label because of our language pops into the mind. And so that's a perception. There's nothing wrong or right about perceptions, but we get attached to the perceptions. And we like some of them and we don't like other ones. Like the perception of the bird singing might be a pleasant one for you, but perception of somebody cutting a fart might be a painful one, excuse my French. But that's just an example. So it's not the perceptions themselves that are right or wrong. A perception is simply a mental picture that's created in the mind from the sensory stimulation, but it's the way that we've trained ourselves to react to it with fear or anxiety or craving, lust, things like that, which make it skillful or unskillful. There's another one about the aggregates. Last night you talked about the 5 aggregates. It seems that many of these are only obtainable with the monastic lifestyle. What or how can we apply mindfulness as, engaged Buddhist citizens in the daily life? It's not that you obtain the aggregates. You have the aggregates all the time. You're born with them. The body, feeling, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. It's just the fact that you may not be aware of their active functioning because they occur on a kind of an unconscious level, although they're there all the time, but you don't see them as kind of separate objects because you're too much caught up in it, tied into it, and identified with them. So it's a matter of training yourself to be able to identify, this is perception, this is feeling, this is mental formation, this is consciousness, this is the body, which can be done in your meditation practice. We haven't gotten there yet, but that's where these last 5 days or so we'll be focusing more on this kind of insight or developing of the Vipassana meditation and training in learning how to objectively see these things for what they are. Is there any detrimental effects to renouncing our human nature? Like sexual needs or needs for attention and all that. Detrimental effects, well, that depends on your point of view, I guess. Anyway, it would depend on the amount of your attachment. If you're married and you renounce your sexual needs, your partner may not appreciate it. Or if you're worrying about the human race disappearing, don't worry about that. But there's basic needs that we have: the need for clothing, medicine, food, and shelter. And these are legitimate needs, and there's no harm in satisfying those needs. But to know the difference between need and greed, that's sort of the line. Because when you have greed for them and need overabundant, that's when the potential for suffering and attachment and so many other things can arise. But when your needs are fairly simple, it's easy to satisfy those things without much problem or difficulty, with no detrimental effect. Oh. How do we get the irritating feelings while on meditation? The irritating itchings on the face and nose while meditating. What is the cause? Anybody else have such problems? How many people feel some, a lot of like itches or stinging sensations or other kind of things that like ants crawling over you, or kind of like the body on fire, or no, these are quite common when you start to meditate, because your mind is withdrawn from your ordinary external preoccupation. So it gets more, everything else becomes more pronounced. And so the feelings in your body, especially when you develop your concentration, and you have nothing else to distract you, because the body then becomes your whole universe, because your eyes are closed, so you're not looking out. There's not too many sounds going on. There's not too many smells or tastes. You're not doing any activity. So the body is basically, becomes in your face, as it were. Of course, you get lost in your thoughts too. And the things that you feel, biologists can tell you that, there's all kind of creepy crawlies living on our body. Microbes, invisible microbes and everything, who are dancing, having parties on our skin, defecating, fornicating, by doing all kind of things. Right on our skin. Or, no, ask any biologist, they'll tell you that. And, we have so many dead cells, skin cells that are, that are always dying. So all this stuff is there. That's what itches. That's what you feel. Things crawling around, invisible microbes and bacteria. And even inside your body too, they're living. Parasites. Even though you can't see them, but any biologist will affirm that. So this is what you feel by and large, although there could be some other things too. And so it's very good, because it's one of the best trainings in keeping alert. And there's so many things happening that it's very good for training our mind in awareness, especially seeing how quickly they arise and vanish and pass away, and learning to let go of the irritation and to relax around it. So it's very good training for the other irritations, the bigger irritations that you're going to encounter, in your daily life when you go home. So the ability to endure and mindfully endure and understand these various irritations and things that you might experience during the retreat. These are very minor things compared to what you're going to get when you go out in the world. Encounter, things. So, but this is a good training ground. If you can learn how to develop your understanding and relax around them, and then you'll be in a better position to transfer that to your daily life situations. Because none of those sensations are, life-threatening or any big deal. And but normally it's just our habit to want to, get rid of any little irritation. People spend the whole day, like sitting on an anthill, and that's very stressful and very for the nervous system. When all these things are just impermanent, they arise, last a few seconds, disappear, and they're not really life-threatening. Actually, you can enjoy almost watching them. Sometimes even very strong sensation, like a stinging sensation, in your eye or on your side of your nose. People have different places where they experience these things more. And it's like, they build up into almost a, very strong kind of sensation. Sometimes it causes tear to roll down the eye. And all kinds of things happen. And it's very interesting just to observe that happening. Like a whole volcano or fireworks are going off in the mind and nervous system. But you can detach from it and just see that, this is the body. This is the part of that understanding. Actually, that I'm going to talk about in a moment. And then this is a similar question. When I do the yoga exercises, I get unpleasant frying feelings everywhere. Should I not do them? I don't know what you mean by frying feelings, but maybe similar, or you might feel just that kind of, the activated life force, because when you do the yoga exercise and the breathing the way we're doing them, you're creating this stronger current of oxygenated blood and life force going through the body. So naturally you're going to have more feelings, and they could manifest in many different ways. Maybe you interpret them in different ways. So there's nothing bad about them, and you can't really do anything about it. And if you want to stop doing the yoga, okay, that's up to you. But they're not anything bad. It's good. It's just that anything strange or unusual that we're not used to experiencing, naturally that we question it. What's that? Is this good or bad? But it is what it is, and most of it is nothing bad. Just the way those same phenomena I was mentioning about meditation, where you experience strange sensations. There's so many phenomena out there in the world that you haven't experienced yet, but they're just phenomena. And we train ourselves to see it as just that. Things arising, things passing away, but 99% of them have nothing to do with us, or no importance for us, no meaning. So we shouldn't burden ourselves with overreacting to them, worrying about them, and so on. That way we can maintain our inner peace, rather than letting all these various things bug us, irritate us. And there's one kind of related question too. Could you discuss the concept of past sankharas manifesting as physical pain or discomfort in the body as they arise and pass away during meditation? Or if this in fact is the case. So how many of you have taken a course with Goenka or a course in Goenka meditation? So it's probably one of you who have written this question, I'm sure, because they're the ones that harp on this idea of sankharas, and they think every painful feeling in the body is due to some past kind of karma or sankhara. That's close to the Jain belief that everything is caused by past karma. But it's true that a lot of the painful feelings that we experience in the body, some of them may be due to past karma. There's sankharas in terms of, they are phenomena, but there's no way we can really pinpoint and try to identify what caused them or what they are. So the best way to deal with them is just to know that this body is full of all kinds of sensations. We'll have pains and sensations due to so many different causes. Just having the body itself is the cause, not that particular pain in the body was caused by something else. But the fact that your knees are made out of bone and flesh and tendons, and if you sit for 3 hours in a full lotus, you're going to get a painful knee. It has nothing to do with a past life, rebirth, or anything else. Or killing a cow or anything. So, don't be too overly concerned about this idea of all these bodily feelings being sankharas and so on. They are sankharas, but the way we deal with them is by you allow it to come up, and you don't try to get rid of it. Now, if you try to get rid of it by changing it, then you're pushing it back to come again. So in that way, it's a sankhara. But if you can observe it and create the space of awareness, or allow the space of awareness there, and allow it to rise up within this awareness and see it for what it is. Let it play itself out. And then it disappears. In that way, you kind of release that sankhara. You let it spend its energy and it gets released. But if you don't let it spend its energy and you push it back in by trying to rub it, get rid of the itch, or move around and try to get rid, then they'll keep coming back. So in that way they are sankharas, and by observing them you can release them. We'll probably talk more about these things as we talk more about the aggregates in future talks. But now I wanted to continue on in our discussions. Or exploration of the meditation practice. Okay, having talked about some of the similarities and differences between yoga and Buddhism, and we mentioned a little bit about briefly the Yoga Eightfold Path. I want to start talking some about the Noble Eightfold Path. The Buddha's teaching on the Noble Eightfold Path. And the Noble Eightfold Path is the fourth of the Four Noble Truths. I think you all know that the Buddha's teaching is given in the outline of the Four Noble Truths. The truth of suffering, the cause of suffering, that there can be a cessation of suffering, and then the path leading to the cessation of suffering, which is the Noble Eightfold Path, or the way to think, meditate, and live to bring about the end of conflict and suffering in our own mind. So the first part of the Eightfold Path, the first step of the Eightfold Path is right understanding. And so right understanding is basically, it means understanding the Four Noble Truths. It means understanding what is suffering, what is its cause, how it can be brought to an end, and the path leading to the end. And there are three levels of suffering. They're the birth, sickness, old age, and death, pain, sorrow, lamentation, grief, and despair are suffering. These are the heavies. And then there's a subtler one, such as stated as not getting what you want and getting what you don't want is suffering. Now this is a more continuous form of suffering. You're not always sick. Of course, we're always growing old, but in microscopic ways. But you're not always sick. You don't always have disease. You don't always have grief and despair and lamentation. And, So that is sort of periodic. But not getting what you want and getting what you don't want is occurring almost every second of the day and night, in terms of the pleasant and unpleasant sensations that are occurring in our body and mind and our reactions to them. And every time you kind of rub or itch something, that means you're not liking that unpleasant sensation. Or you're getting what you don't want, an itch. Or you're getting what you don't want, a pain in your knee. Or, abusive language. Or so many things. Or what you want can't get satisfied. So, this phenomena is occurring, but on very subtle levels. We're oblivious to a lot of it. When you meditate, you can see it more pronouncedly because you can observe the more subtle and unconscious manifestations of that. And then the third level of the suffering is the five aggregates itself. The Buddha said, in short, the five aggregates of clinging are dukkha, suffering. And we're going to be talking more about the five aggregates, including even right now I wanted to, go into more about the body, because we had started that last night as well. So the right understanding, the Buddha didn't want us to do anything without, understanding why. What is the purpose of it? Or the understanding of the nature of, life. So part of the right understanding is understanding the law of karma. Whatever we do consciously, by body, speech, and mind, has a possibility to bring a result back to us. And this is illustrated very beautifully in the first two verses of the Dhammapada, which go, all actions are led by the mind. Mind is their master. Mind is their maker. Act or speak with an impure state of mind, and suffering will follow, as the cartwheel follows the foot of the ox. And in the same way, if one acts or speaks with a pure state of mind, then happiness will follow, as your shadow follows you without departing. So in those two verses lie the kind of the essence of the Buddha's teachings about karma and about the training of the mind. So if we act or speak through an impure state of mind, what is an impure state of mind? It means any thoughts or actions motivated by greed, selfish greed, aversion, hatred, and ignorance. Ignorance means not knowing the truth. Or the deepest level of ignorance means clinging to I, me, and mine, being driven by I, me, and mine, and believing that this ego and the self is real, and this world is for this ego to just enjoy as it wants to. That's basically ignorance from the Buddhist point of view. But not knowing the Four Noble Truths is said to be the whole scope of ignorance. Not knowing about suffering, not knowing the cause of suffering, not knowing about the end of suffering, not knowing about the way to bring suffering to an end. That is ignorance. But understanding this, the law of cause and effect, or the law of karma, and how our actions, like not living by the precepts, are the things that cause us the most type of karmic suffering by living an uncontrolled, undisciplined life. And understanding how it all comes from our mind. And then there's the three characteristics of impermanence, suffering or unsatisfactoriness, and no self, which are the characteristics of all conditioned phenomena. And all conditioned phenomena fall into the categories of the five aggregates. Everything in the whole world or universe falls into one of those five aggregates. But the first one is the aggregate of matter, which includes this body. So this body is made up of the four elements. Although when you were first born, your mother and father produces some invisible little, egg. It's even invisible. But in a few short weeks, it starts to grow. And the essence of that growth is it's producing or growing in four elements: earth, fire, water, and air. Or the essence of materiality. And it grows into this body. But this body is impermanent. It's constantly changing. And scientists can tell you that every 7 years, every single cell in your body will have changed. So that if you're, 21 years old, you've already had 3 totally different bodies. If you're 49 years old, you've had, 7 different bodies. And if you're, 64 or whatever, then it keeps mounting. But this body is always changing, and everything in the world around us is changing. And this is one of the investigations of insight in the Vipassana meditation practice. And this kind of brings us to where we left off yesterday in discussing the foundations of mindfulness. So how many remember yesterday we were discussing that, mindfulness of breathing helps us, get to the body. And then we're aware of the 4 postures. And then we're aware of the body movements. So basically that's an exercise to bring the mind to the present moment, to get the mind centered and grounded in the body. But then the next step in the contemplation of the body is you investigate this body in the 4 elements. In this body there's earth element, fire element, water element, and air element. And of course, you may do this intellectually at first, but then in actual practice, and this is what I want to lead you through what's called a body scanning meditation tomorrow, to try to more directly feel these kind of elemental properties. So the earth element is anything that's hard in the body, like skin, bones, flesh, anything that you can feel, anything tangible. Your hair, the nails. Or if you feel something in the body, like you feel your rib cage and expanding and contracting and pushing against flesh, it's a vibration. And I prefer to call it the earth vibration. You know, it's a tactile feeling, but you identify it as my body. And then there's the water element, of course, you know, saliva and tears and urine and sweat, even pus, blood. These all belong to we call the water element, or the fluid vibration. Because when we feel a tear running down, you know, there's that fluid or watery sensation. We have saliva in the mouth, you know, we can feel that fluid sensation. So that fluid vibration is the water element. And we identify, we perceive that, oh, that's my saliva, but actually it's the water element. It's only what you feel. And then there's the fire element, which is the heat in the body. You have a fever, the heat produced by digestion, or even the whole range of temperature between cold and being hot. And then there's the air element, manifested mostly by the breathing going in and out. There's also other air in the body, air in your bowels. If you let air out the backside, you know, there's air in different places in the body. Or you belch, air in the stomach. And all these four elements basically are interacting to maintain the life of the body. Whenever they get disturbed, that's when body problems arise. If there's not enough water element, you might get dehydrated. If you get too hot, you could die if you got a fever of 106. Or if you get too cold, you could die. Because the temperature element gets disturbed. Or there's too much wind in the body, you can get problems and gas and other things. But so we train ourselves just to see this body as just, feeling this body as these elemental properties. And knowing how they just arise and pass away. They're continually just, arising, interacting, vanishing. Cells are dying. Things are passing away. And it's just, carrying on the life process. And so we train ourselves just to objectively see the body as that process and kind of detach from it. And if we feel something like the bones or something else, it's just earth element. If you say that's my leg, then you identify it and get attached to it. But if you just be aware of earth element, earth vibration, water vibration, air vibration, heat vibration, then there's no creating a my body out of it. And so the tendency for the mind to not get so worried about it will gradually come about. But then after that, the Buddha even broke it down. Excuse me, actually, I missed one stage. Excuse me. Okay, before the four elements actually is the 32 body parts. So that comes before the four elements because it's a gradual breakdown. So, you can actually go through the body and be aware of, yes, there's hair on the head, nails, teeth, skin, and all the various organs, kidneys, liver, pancreas, intestines, stomach, even brain, feces, urine, sweat, tears, called the 32 body parts. And you see how each of these body parts is impermanent. They're always changing. Our hair is growing out, it's changing. Our nails are growing out. They cause us lots of problems. And we get attached to them. We get attached to the outer marks of the body. And then it becomes a problem. Because we develop desire. You see somebody with beautiful hair. Oh, what beautiful hair they have. So we get attached to hair. But what happens if you go to a restaurant and the waiter brings you a plate of food and there's a hair in it? But when the hair is on the head, it looks very nice. We like to comb it. And we try to impress with the ladies. They go to the hair salon and get curled and all that. We try to impress people by the hair. We all know that. And a lot of suffering goes along with that because some people don't like their hair. If they're a brunette, they'd rather be a blonde. If they're blonde, they'd rather be a brunette or a redhead. Some people are dyeing their hair, changing. And when we get older, it turns gray. But the Buddha told us, try to just see these things for what they are. And then all the rest, then the nails. We try to, paint the nails, the fingernails, the toenails to impress people. But they're also a source of problem. You get ingrown toenails, they hurt. We have to keep cutting them. We have to clean the dirt and the muck from underneath them. Clean a toe jam. This body is continually producing filth. We have to scrub the body daily with soap in order to even stand being in it. And have to clean the teeth and everything. Because this is the nature of the body. That's the Buddha said body is basically a foul thing. But because we live in an illusion, we keep scrubbing it so we're under the illusion that it smells nice. We keep cleaning the teeth. We keep cleaning everything because it's continually accumulating dirt. And it's not a very nice looking thing. If you let it go for 1 week, no one will even want to stand by you. But this is the reality of the body. And so this kind of meditation is just kind of a reality check. But it's part of kind of insight of meditation practice. But then going beyond that, all these 32 parts then are broken down into just the 4 elements. And so there's, different numbers of the body parts belong, or of the earth elements. Some of the water element, some of the air element. Or mostly the water element and the earth element. But then you can break that down further. What are these elements actually? Or what do you feel when you feel the body? What you feel is just sensation. And all those 32 body parts and all the flesh and other things, they're just comprised of basically cells, molecules, and atoms. Right? Does anybody doubt that? So, the body is comprised, let's say, of a million cells. And the cells are comprised of, millions of molecules. And the molecules are comprised of millions of atoms. And what is an atom? What's an atom comprised of? Electrons. Maybe some other things too, but the electrons are what determine what kind of an element that is. So electron, what is electron? It's just electricity. It's energy. So if you start from there and you build it back up, you realize matter, this thing we call a solid body, is basically just energy. But condensed and solidified, giving the illusion of something that's solid. So in Vipassana meditation, the perception of impermanence is a practice in which you tune the mind into that, to directly experience the body as just being a mass of changing sensations and vibrations. Like with the relaxation after the yoga exercise, some of you said you could kind of feel that. But even in meditation, when you focus your mind on it, you can also feel that. And it can build up to a point where, when you're feeling lots of sensation, that the feeling of a solid body will actually disappear from the mind. And it will become very, very light. And there'll just be a lot of sensations, but there won't be this idea of a hard, rigid body there. And that's liberation. That's a very blissful experience. Because all the pains that would have been there also disappear. And you can directly experience that sort of thing in meditation, if you direct your mind to it. But that's an aspect of insight. So that would be an example of an insight when, if you were doing that, then just sort of the hard edges of the body kind of, dissolved, and there was just a feeling of more open space and lightness. But yet sensations are still there, but they're like just occurring in space, not contained within some definite shape and form. So that's an insight into the nature of perception. These things are all related. That we perceive that we have a body of a certain solid-looking shape, but that's a perception. That the mind has created. But the reality is just energy and vibrations. But anyway, that may be a little bit above your head at this moment to understand, but the idea is that it's a process. The contemplation of the body is a gradual process where you see beyond the superficial whole that we normally get attached to. Because you say, seeing the whole body and just the features of the hair, the eyes, the skin, the shape of the body, and we get then lust and desire for it, because that's all we're seeing. So the one of the purposes of the insight meditation and the Buddhist teaching, of course, is to overcome suffering due to ignorance and because of attachment and craving. So when we learn to see reality as it is, then we begin to let go of our strong clinging and craving for the things that cause us unskillful actions and get us into karmic difficulties and so on. So that contemplation of the body is very good practice, especially for people that have strong attachment to the body. But practicing that form of body awareness where you're tuning in to the sensations and allowing you can feel incredibly subtle sensations sometimes. And then there's a last step of the body contemplation, which is called the cemetery contemplations. And this is associated with the idea of death, the inevitability of death. And, this body was born, but it was born with a one-way ticket to the graveyard. That means because anything is born is destined for death. And we don't know when this body will die. Life isn't certain. Is life certain? Are you 100% sure you're going to live until tomorrow morning? Is anybody 100% certain? There's snakes out there. There's trees that can fall down on your cootie. That happened one time. We used to have a cootie up there next to the men's dorm. And a big tree about 18 inches in diameter went right through the middle of it and smashed it just like toothpicks going, phew. Fortunately, there was no one in it. So, but death is certain, but we don't know, of course, when it will happen. In fact, there's an interesting little saying that life is a sexually transmitted disease. And it's always fatal. If you can kind of, laugh about that. Keep a sense of humor about it. So anyway, this is all an aspect of seeing reality as it is and gaining the truest perspective about the nature of the life and the body. But as a practical meditation, of course, these are things that you can also reflect on even while you are meditating. These would be part of right thought. The thought of renunciation, as I mentioned this morning. It means, letting go of your attachment to the bodies, or letting you go of your attachment to other things of the material world that are, always changing and beyond our control. So, you could actually just think about that while you're meditating too. Or think about the law of karma and how the painful results of things that you did earlier, how they followed you around and so on. So these are all also aspects of what is called investigating Dhamma. There's something called the 7 enlightenment factors. 7 factors of enlightenment, which are the mental qualities needed for training the mind toward eventually the deepest realizations and for liberation. And the first one is mindfulness. And the second is investigation of the Dhamma. And that means even intellectually thinking about and examining the Buddha's teachings, the Dhamma, along these lines, like investigating the body. What is this body? Okay, it's 32 parts. What are 32 parts? Just 4 elements. What are 4 elements? Cells, molecules, atoms, energy. So that would be a kind of a systematic, investigation down to the elemental reality. And that can also be applied then to the other aggregates of feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness, to see their true nature, so that we're not beguiled by them, that we're not fooled by them, and so that they cause us suffering. So this is the aspect of training in insight. In the next few days, once having, hopefully developed at least some little bit of, concentration power, the ability to stay focused, and some relaxation, hindrances not so strong, then you can do this type of Vipassana meditation or insight exploration by observing the moment-to-moment activities of the body and mind. So that's the direction of the next days of the instructions and practice. You game for that? Buckle up. Okay. So I think that may be enough for this talk.